Good afternoon. My name is Tom Magnuson. I'm the lead emergency planner with Tampa Emergency Management here in the city. And we're glad that you're all with us this afternoon. We're focused on all hazards as we look at disasters within the city of Tampa and our current response. And today we would like to focus on the hurricane aspect and that we're in the hurricane season and talk about some special considerations regarding insurance. We have a special guest with us today. His name is Jeff Italiano with Italiano Insurance Services. And Jeff, I would like to thank you for participating with us today to answer questions that citizens have.
Great.
Jeff, I was wondering, first of all, now that we're in hurricane season, what types of insurance should citizens be considering?
Okay, so when we're dealing with hurricanes, we need to think of three different policies: the auto policy, the home policy, and the flood policy. All of these get affected by hurricanes.
Okay, all right. So when we're looking at these different insurance policies, vehicle, home, looking specifically at the home, is there any difference between our standard insurance policy and, say, a hurricane wind policy or a flood insurance policy? And how do these kind of differ from one another?
Yes, there's a huge difference. Most people have the misconception that their home policy includes flood. That is not the case. In order to have coverage for a flood, you have to have a separate flood policy for flood losses.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great information to know. Now, as we're early in the season, it would be a great opportunity for everybody to first review the current insurance policy that you do have to determine if you have the appropriate insurance and understand and know that flood is different from wind. Considering the policies, can I just buy a policy for the hurricane season?
No, actually you can't. So the flood policy must be purchased on an annual basis. The policy has to be paid in full and it's fully earned. You can't cancel the policy. Otherwise, people would buy it just for hurricane season and it would be adverse selection. I think one important thing to talk about is that, there's different types of floods. So if you, for example, we have a bad storm like a hurricane, and it doesn't even have to be a hurricane, just a bad wind and someone's roof's ripped off or their windows are blown in and water goes in their house, that's not flood. That's wind coverage. And that's part of your homeowner's policy. Flood insurance is rising water. So we think of it as dirty water. So it's the bay, it's the river, it can just be the streets. We don't have to have a hurricane or tropical storm to have flooding. 2 weeks ago, we had 45 minutes of a rainstorm in Tampa, and I know of two businesses that flooded on Kennedy Boulevard. So I think the fact from FEMA is 1 inch of rain can cause $25,000 in flood damage.
Okay, well, that's all very good information to know. And I appreciate you bringing up the point that it's not just hurricanes we look at or afternoon thunderstorms. There's a lot of considerations that can go into, how we can have a flood or take a flood loss, and it only takes that small amount. In asking that question and looking at this, I've had citizens come and talk with me and say, well, I'm not in a what they designate a 100-year floodplain, or I'm not required with my mortgage to have flood insurance. And what are some comments that you may want to make to citizens that are concerned about flooding in their area regarding that?
What we say is if you're in Florida, you're in a flood zone. You may not be in a flood zone that your bank requires you to have flood insurance. It's still a good idea to have it. I think there's a statistic from FEMA that 25% or more of all floods happen in zones that are not required to have it by the bank. So I know that in Hurricane Michael, we saw this big time. In the Panhandle, the waters went in so far that many homes were damaged by flood and they didn't have flood insurance because their banks were required to have it. If you are in a zone that's not required to have flood by your bank, you can get a preferred flood policy, and that preferred flood policy comes at a discounted rate. I like to tell people all the time, think about flood insurance or preferred flood insurance if you're not in the flood zone required by the bank, as an early Christmas present. You can buy a policy for as little as $300 a year if you're not in a bank required flood zone.
Okay, well, very good information to consider. And, we do encourage, Jeff, great points about Hurricane Michael. During Hurricane Harvey in the Texas area and Houston, some of the things we've seen in the past years in other areas in the Gulf states, a lot of folks that were impacted are disaster survivors. Indeed, we're not within 100-year floodplains, and
Yes.
indeed, we're not insured. And that's a serious impact when you sustain that kind of loss.
Yeah. Also,
So,
when there's a big, we have big storms, okay, because that's what people mostly think of when they think of
right.
flood insurance. Is it's very difficult to tell which part was wind and which part was flood. Typically, an adjuster will go out and they'll look at a building and they'll look for a flood line, and that's what they see. I mean, uh, so if you are in the Tampa Bay area, it's a good idea to have flood insurance, or at least have the conversation and be aware of what it costs, and make the prudent choice, whether to have it or not.
Okay. All right. Very, very good. So as we're looking in this hurricane season, we talked about going ahead and reviewing existing insurance policies, assessing whether, as an individual, we need to obtain an insurance policy. As we continue with our overall preparedness for hurricane season, what would be some recommendations that you might make to the general public about preparing for any potential insurance claims they've had
Mhm.
before we're impacted by a disaster?
I think the most important thing, you said it there, is plan. You need to plan for what could come. So first of all, you need to get out your policy. You need to review it. You may have made changes to your home. Uh, Construction costs may have increased, etc. So you need to maybe have that conversation beforehand with your insurance agent and say, hey, do I have enough coverage? The other thing, you need to know where you're going to go if a storm's coming. I know you guys probably talked about this in an earlier webcast, but a lot of people think, hey, the storm's coming, I might go to Gainesville, I might go to Lake City. Well, those hotels are all full. So have a plan, have a family member, have somewhere you're going to go. Get a copy of your policy and have it maybe on your phone. Take a copy of it. Make sure you have the telephone number for your insurance agent. And I like to tell all my clients, I could be flooded too. So make sure that your insurance agent gives you the telephone number for the insurance company themselves so you can report that claim yourself. If we have a big disaster, we're all in this together. We may not be available to help you, at first. The other thing you do is that you take pictures of your home, all inside your home, because what we've seen with disasters is you can't remember what you had in each room. It becomes overwhelming. So take pictures, store them in a safe place. I know a lot of our clients send us their pictures, and we store them, in their policy, in their client file, so they have an idea what they had. Also, if you make big purchases, save the receipts, do the same thing, scan them, take pictures of them, save them, because when it's time to provide your adjuster with claim information, they're going to ask for detail. They're going to ask for an inventory. So it's tough to put that together if you don't have pictures to help you remember.
Excellent advice for everybody. As part of your comprehensive disaster preparedness kit and your plan, is to consider the damages that you may sustain in your home. Follow Jeff's advice in bringing that information together, collecting it, documenting it, deciding how you're going to move forward, and if you need to avoid a risk area and you need to evacuate. We just recently received a question from the public, Jeff, and one of the tack-ons that they were interested in knowing is, in addition, is there any particular measures or steps that can be done on the home or on the property to help strengthen and reinforce it, but at the same time, lower those insurance premiums or lower those overall insurance costs before having a disaster?
Yeah, no, there really isn't, because your home, your flood policy is based on the elevation of your home. So that would have been done at the time of construction. What you can do to mitigate a claim, though, is raise up furniture, move things off the floor. They say, anchor appliances and things outside so they can't float and cause further damage, that type of thing. Those are things that can be done. and then just get out and be safe.
Okay, very good, Jeff. So for floods, mitigative steps, part of your preparedness before you're impacted by an event. In addition, for wind, is there any considerations there, or would that apply the same? There would be no change in any.
Well, no, with winds you can, because you can mitigate. The home can be, you can add like high impact glass, you can add shutters and things like that. So if your home is in Tampa, the requirement has not been there in the past for wind, hurricane glass. You can add it to your home. It's a little costly, but if you do add it to your home, you'll get a very large credit on your home policy. So those are steps you can take, or shutters, or even Kevlar, the type thing that vests are made out of, that can be retrofitted for your windows. You just have to cover every opening, and you can get, like I said, a sizable credit on your home policy.
Okay, very, very beneficial information to know. So we have an event, we have an impact. I'm an insured person, and I take a damage or I take a loss. Could you discuss some of the steps that I would go through in processing a claim? Would I contact you directly, or would I be contacting an alternate source through the company?
Absolutely. So let's just go back for just a second and clarify. If you're a homeowner, you can buy flood. If
Okay.
you're a renter, you can buy flood. If you're a business, you can buy flood. So that's available to everyone. All right. So um, keep that in mind, and investigate it. Make the choice. Okay. So you have a claim. The most important thing is to stay out of your house until it's safe to return. You don't want standing water in your home, because you could get, have, like electricity, and cause, it could cause death. So you have to be very careful. Once you can get back into your home, you need to, first thing, call either your insurance agent or your insurance company and report the claim. All right. So put them on notice. The second thing you do is take pictures everywhere. It's digital. So take a ton of pictures, show the damage. Then flood insurance policies, as well as hurricane or homeowners policies, have very limited coverage for mold. All right. So you don't want your home to sit there all wet. So if you have wet carpet, wet furniture, etc., you need to get it out of your house. You've already taken pictures of it. Put it outside. Don't get rid of it. Just put it outside. And you can call um, a contractor to come in and dry your home out. The one thing you can't do is start permanent repairs until the adjuster's taken a look at your home. But you can do, and they will pay for steps to mitigate loss, to keep it from getting worse. So when it comes to a home policy, your policy usually has about 10% mold coverage. You can increase that. And I think it's a great idea. I know with some of the claims that we've seen in past hurricanes, it takes a long time for an adjuster to get out. It takes a long time for a contractor to get out to help you dry the home. So there tends to be a lot of mold. But just keep in mind, you're allowed, and they will pay for you to mitigate, or get things out of the home, clean the home up as much as possible. And it's not going to affect your claim. They're still going to pay out the same way. A lot of people want their house to look bad because they think that the claim, they'll get a higher payout. But honestly, it's your duty to, keep the claim as low as possible and keep from your home from being a disaster.
Okay, good information to know. So what we're looking at is, if we take an impact from a disaster, we're filing a claim. Do engage in any emergency protective measures that protect your house. And in return to that, try and mitigate additional losses, being mindful of mold contamination, and then wait for that adjuster to assist with the claim. One question I would ask in that is a recovery process can take a long period of time. In that consideration, somebody may be displaced from their home for a period of time. Are there considerations for alternate living expenses that can come in insurance policies, or any recommendations on that?
Right. So there is, for hurricane loss, wind loss, on the home policy, you have loss of use coverage, so you can get alternative living quarters. Now, the flood policy doesn't offer that. Okay. The flood policy offers coverage for the dwelling and for your personal property, appliances, etc., clothes, things like that. It doesn't have coverage for loss of use.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Jeff. We did just receive an additional question from the public,
Mhm.
and it's a great question. They were asking if I'm in my home and I sustain an injury as a result of the disaster impact, is there any coverages that come with those medical expenses involved in a homeowner's insurance or a flood insurance policy?
No, not if it's you. No, there is not. So your health insurance would respond for that.
Okay. As we talked about homeowners quite a bit, any special considerations for renters? Renters should also be looking to obtain wind policies and consider flood policies. Jeff, would
Absolutely.
you like to add anything to
Yep.
that?
Renters can buy it's called an HO4 policy. It's a renter's policy. It's a home policy for a renter. So it's just covering their items in the home. They also can buy a flood policy for their contents. It's relatively inexpensive, and so is the renter's policy as well. And I found that most people don't. And the thing to remember too, it also covers you for liability, which is just a bonus. I mean, if you had a pet that bit someone or tripped someone, or if someone got hurt in your home. So it's always a good idea as a renter to have insurance as well as a homeowner.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Businesses, are there any additional considerations we may have for businesses above and beyond what we've
Yeah.
discussed so
I
far?
think that flood insurance for businesses is one of the most underutilized policies I've seen. Most businesses don't buy it. It's very important. Like I told you 2 weeks ago, we had two businesses on Kennedy flood, and that was just a rainstorm. So, uh, there was some statistics done, and I think FEMA's also done them, City of Tampa's done them, that if a storm hits us in the right position, perhaps maybe just a little north of us, and it spins up into our bay, that downtown Tampa could be 12 foot or more underwater. So most businesses in Florida or in Tampa should definitely have flood insurance as well. They're able to buy 500,000 in flood insurance. So they should also look at it. It should be part of their strategic plan.
Okay, great information, and absolutely good to also know those policy limits. That is additional consideration for your planning. Any kind of savings that you can do as part of your disaster preparedness plan is always advantageous.
Right. So
Um,
on the
I'm
home,
sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. For the home policy, through FEMA, you can buy 250,000 on the dwelling and $100,000 on your contents. There's been a big shift in the last few years to private market flood. So it's a private insurance company, not FEMA, that's offering flood coverage. Those policies can actually go higher. And those policies can also include loss of use. So FEMA's not offering that, but these private market flood companies are. So it could be Hartford, Chubb, large insurance carriers that are willing to take on some risk for some flood. So it's a good idea to call your insurance agent and say, hey, are there other options, and what would the cost be? Can I get better coverage? Can I get more coverage? So it's just another opportunity to touch base with your insurance agent and just review, plan, as we talked about earlier. So I suggest everyone do that.
Okay, very great information again. Jeff, you know exactly, we should assess also the value of our property, ensure as our comprehensive plan that we don't have any gaps in our coverages, and seek alternatives that can support to make us whole. Insurance is our number one line of defense in our recovery and the success of our recovery following a disaster. And Jeff, I was wondering if there was any additional comments that you would like to make to the public today.
Well, I want to say that a lot of times when we're dealing with a client, we offer them flood. Every client, we make them sign a letter saying they've been offered. What we usually hear in return is FEMA will just help me pay for my claim if I have one. Well, there is money available through FEMA, but it's not a handout. It's a low interest loan that has to be paid back. So I think I was in 2017, the average flood claim was $92,000. Okay. That number came down in 2018 to about 42,000. But if you can buy a flood policy for $500, and it covers you, for that flood loss, and you don't have to have a loan with FEMA, I mean, it makes sense. Again, think of it as an early Christmas present to yourself.
So the other consideration is very affordable to cover yourself, provides peace of mind.
Exactly.
Jeff, I would like to sincerely thank you for joining us today and addressing the citizens' questions and providing this valuable information. For everybody, we continue to encourage all to be prepared for this hurricane season, to include your insurance considerations. And we're wishing you well as we move forward into the 2020 hurricane season.
Thank you.
Thank you.